My name is Andy Romano. I am a research director at Zeldis.
And I'm Leanne Storer, a senior research director at Zeldis. And as Brad mentioned, Zeldis Research is a boutique-sized company that specializes in customized market research. And we're excited to be celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, 2016. So we feel that this quote best summarizes what we're here to talk about today. A picture is worth 1,000 words.
That's right. So keeping that in mind, if all of you can take a moment and look deep into this cute little baby's eyes and just kind of explore what it makes you feel when you're sitting here and just really kind of experiencing this image. So we believe that images are evocative, that when you're looking into her eyes, your brain is making an immediate connection based on experiences that you've had in your life. So you have an immediate value judgment that you associate with this picture of this cute little baby.
Yeah. So, and you may be wondering why visual reporting is important. Hopefully you're already buying into it, given that you're joining us here today. But we put together some thoughts as to why we think it's important. Our brains are wired to process images much easier than text alone. In fact, images are processed by the human brain 60,000 times faster than just text. So what does that mean? That means that it takes more mental effort to process words than it does images. Images also help us provide better recall than text alone. So if you read a piece of information, a few days later you may remember only about 10% of that information. But if there's a picture that accompanies that text, the recall can go up to 65%. Also, as Andy demonstrated with the cute little baby, images create an immediate emotional connection. So we've learned at a very early age to associate objects with behaviors, and pictures in reports can help do that. They also allow readers to more easily absorb complex data. So images and visuals are a great way of reducing information to simple terms and helping the reader understand what you're trying to communicate. And also images can be used to create continuity for subgroups and themes. So we like to use color and icons to help identify patterns in data, and we have some examples of that in our presentation.
Right. So one thing that we'd like to talk about and just kind of discuss and think about how to use visual elements, we feel that it's definitely most suited for the upfront section of a report, so the executive summary, the key findings, that sort of thing. You can certainly incorporate visual elements throughout, but it's not something that needs to be kind of carried through the entire report, but it's most suited to the upfront section and the stuff that you really want to communicate immediately in the outset of your report. And this is to kind of give folks who maybe don't have a research focus just a quicker, easier way to digest some of the key themes that you're trying to communicate. So what we have here is kind of a more traditional slide that could be in an executive summary. And there's a lot of numbers here, a lot of bulleted text on a page. It's kind of really, there's a little bit of bolding here and there, but it's tough to really see kind of what is popping here in terms of the different points. So what we've done is taken this and kind of changed it to something that's a little bit more visual. It's a little more compartmentalized, kind of easier to pick up the different aspects just at a quick glance. So somebody who maybe isn't used to research can kind of digest this a little bit more quickly.
Yep, and here's another example. Recently we conducted some proprietary research on the study of the evolution of insurance channels. So here, again, a more traditional way of presenting the data. We have the questions, and we were looking at age. That was an important component of what we were doing. So we wanted to look at millennials, Gen Xers, and baby boomers. So here's a table that has this information by question. It's one way of showing the data, but we presented it another way. So here, if you take a look, so you might see that we use the letters MXD to identify the 3 subgroups. We have color to help identify the subgroups as well. And there's visuals that really hopefully draw the reader in and make it a little more interesting to get the same information that we saw in those tables, but this is just a more visual and we think more interesting way of presenting it.
Right. So again, as we were saying before, when we're talking about kind of reaching out to some of those either internal stakeholders or folks outside of your company that are trying to really get a quick glance at your research or having the first exposure to it, using visual elements is a great way to really get them to understand it quickly and kind of dig in a little bit deeper. So it's a great way to get a little bit of a hook for those folks who aren't as used to digging into some deep, rich data, to just kind of get them in and draw them in deeper. It's a great way to reach out to some of your external contacts, and that could be clients, prospects, customers, through newsletters or any other communication that you want to have to kind of tease out study data or get them a little bit more interested in the things that you're doing. And also outside of your company through social media, going through and using images is a great way to really get them hooked on your data or reach out to them in a new way. So as an example here, we mentioned that tweets with images receive 18% more clicks, 89% more favorites, and 150% more retweets than those without. So again, we feel that using images will help you just help your audience understand your data better, which will again lead to greater exposure.
So what makes for good visual reporting? Well, it's important to keep in mind, again, thinking about the piece being the upfront piece in a report, a key finding or executive summary section of the report. You want to keep in mind the purpose of that piece and who the main audience will be and what questions should be answered and how will the information be used and shared. Oftentimes we have clients that they will take that upfront piece and that's what they'll distribute. They'll have the detailed findings for their use, but they take that upfront piece. So you want to keep in mind how that information is going to be used. So you want to draw the reader in and hold their attention. The goal is to tell a compelling story that the audience actually wants to read. And probably a no-brainer, but it should be aesthetically pleasing. You want to use the graphics to enhance understanding, but it's important to keep in mind that the graphics and visuals should serve a purpose and not just look nice when you're incorporating them. And also, again, this upfront piece, key findings, should be simple and to the point and does not say too much. You have the detailed findings. That's where you want to have all of the information. In this visual piece, you want to pull out and get to the most important main messages of your story. And the supporting details can be a little less prominent on the page. And lastly, you want to keep in mind, as Andy likes to call, the 6-foot test. So if you take a step back, well, you have an immediate high-level understanding of what is being communicated.
Right, and talking about that 6-foot test, just taking a look at an image and being able to understand kind of what it's trying to communicate. Maybe you don't know all the answers and all the different intricacies of the data pieces, but you kind of get an idea for the question that's being asked and what comparisons are being made. So to kind of illustrate this point, we went out and searched out a couple of what we think are good examples of this 6-foot test. So here's an infographic that if we look at immediately, we can see that we know it's about food. There's forks on the page here, and there's some sort of comparisons being drawn with the prongs of the forks, and then some sort of subgroup comparison or difference there with the two different colors of the different forks. So as you dig in deeper, so immediately, okay, we get what this is about. You're drawn in to learn a little bit more about it. You can see that it's about restaurant spending and comparing different restaurants, both in fast food and sit-down, as your two different subgroups here. Here's another example of a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. Craft beer is right in the forefront there. You know exactly what it's about. You have that in the middle. That's where your eye is drawn. And then that big glass of beer all the way to the left here. So immediately you look at this page. Even though there's a lot going on, you know what it's about and you know what it's trying to tell you. Then for me, my eye is drawn to that timeline along the bottom and then the curve up to the right, kind of expressing the growth of craft breweries from the dip in 1980 up through 2013 and then through the present. And then from there, there's lots of other different facts all over the page that you can kind of explore after you kind of know what this is about. You can find out about the criteria for craft beer, proper glassware, and things like that. But the whole idea is that you're immediately drawn in, you know what this is about, and then you kind of dig in a little bit deeper to some of those other data points.
Great. So by now you may be thinking and wondering, where should I start in this process? And the task may seem a little daunting, but now we're going to give you some tips that will hopefully help you with your reporting in a more visual way.
So, not surprisingly, the more planning that you commit up front, the better end product you'll probably get. But also, at least for me and for us, we found that with visual reporting, being able to actually commit that time up front will probably wind up saving you time in the long run, as you won't have as many fits and starts. It definitely can be somewhat time-consuming, especially if you're new to it when comparing to more traditional reporting, kind of making things a bit more visual. But going in with a plan is a great way of at least going in and starting from somewhere that you can really hit the ground running. So as with any research study, it's definitely important to identify what you feel the key findings and the real takeaways from your study is, which is not surprising. That's something that we all do in the industry. But also, especially when you're creating more visual elements, really taking those bullet points that you have that are your key takeaways and distilling the language as much as possible, really cutting out any of the fat in terms of the language, will really help to focus what you're doing in terms of creating visuals. You won't have a lot of extra stuff there that you have to kind of work around. Then also, just a good tip and something that you should do with any research studies, being able to collaborate and brainstorm with colleagues, kind of take the data back, bounce it off one another, and really figure out what are the key sticking points. But also kind of, in terms of creating a visual, it's a great idea to have two different people collaborating with one another, figuring out what will work and what won't. So if you have somebody, one, two, maybe a team of people that are working on a study together, it's great to work with them to be able to create ideas for visuals that you're going to go into. But it's also great to take somebody who's outside of that sphere of influence of your study and bounce the ideas off of them once you have a draft or a finished product for a visual. Sometimes when we're going in and we're doing the research, we're there from kickoff call all the way through the end. We're really married to the data and very comfortable with it. But the whole idea here with visuals is that you want to be able to have somebody who is just being exposed to this for the first time be able to pick it up and understand it very quickly. So being able to reach outside of that sphere of influence is a great way to really understand and get an objective view on whether or not this is working visually. And then finally, just being able to sketch out the ideas for your visual elements. So that could be anything from electronically or looking at different options that you have in terms of different resources, but also just take a pen and paper. You could take some crayons, go back to second grade, really just have some fun with it, sketch out some ideas, and then come up with that ideal or what you think is the best way to present something visually. And then at least you have something to shoot for. So it goes back to the whole idea of having a focused goal and being able to try to reach for that. Obviously, things might change as you actually take that from paper to an electronic version, but being able to focus on the outset will definitely help both create a better end product and save you time in the long run.
Absolutely, and as Andy was saying, so when I'm doing a key findings section or an upfront piece, I like to put everything in bullets. So I have my PowerPoint open, and you basically know your data. You have your detailed findings. So it's very easy to create a bulleted list of the information that you want in that upfront piece. But then once you have that, then it's where do you go? So don't feel like you need to reinvent the wheel. There's plenty of places to go for inspiration. So you have your data that you want to share. You can do an internet search engine. You can go to Google. I use Google Images all the time. You can put in specific questions that you're trying to demonstrate in an infographic. You can show positives, negatives, top reasons. Put that in, and you'll be amazed at the information that comes up in Google Images. And perhaps you can't do that exactly, but you can take elements of what you see and use that in your piece. And if you find that this is something that you really want to do moving forward, you might want to invest in template packages or icon libraries. And we actually have some that we use, and we're going to share those with you at the end of the presentation. But they are a great way to give you a jump start. So again, you can look at the template packages, see the ideas that are in there, and take them or work off of them or try something different. But those are a great way to get you started. And icon libraries are an amazing way of just putting a little icon on the page can make a big difference, even as we see here. And then Andy was talking about collaborating with your colleagues. That you may have an idea and you can't narrow it down and get it exactly where you want it. Someone else might be able to help move it along for you. And at Zeldis, we actually, on our server, we keep a reporting folder. So anytime any of us do a report that we think is particularly visual or something different outside of how we typically do things, we throw that into that reporting folder. And then anytime any of us are starting a project, we can go there. And that's where we keep our template packages and our icon libraries. And it's a great resource all in one place for doing this kind of reporting. So also within PowerPoint, there are some tools that you can use. Here's an example of some smart art options. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever worked with smart art, but if you have, you might find that, what do we call it? It's a little clunky. Depending on the information that you want to put in there, if you're trying to work within the smart art, if you have a lot of text, you might find that it's difficult. The more text you put in, the smaller the font gets, and it's difficult to read. So if you have minimal text, smart art can be a great option. But also, I like to use smart art just for inspiration. So I'll go in and look at the various smart art options, and even if I'm not actually using the smart art tool, I will copy a design that I see. So I would just create some of these shapes that I see. So the pros, cons, and implications up there on the right, I could just create those shapes. That's a smart art, but I could replicate it very easily, and that allows me to have more flexibility in terms of what I'm trying to put in there. But just don't forget that smart art is a great resource. And also, just simply using shapes on the Insert tab in PowerPoint, you can come up with some basic. This isn't incredibly visual, but it's just an easy way of using shapes to create a little bit of interest on the slide. That's a little something out of the ordinary. That's not just text. And these are some examples of how we've used shapes. So in the top right, we've had magazine covers that we've put on there, so things not associated with the magazine. And so, just don't forget that you can use shapes as an easy way of creating something visual.
Another great resource that you can have, and you've seen kind of used throughout here, as Leanne had mentioned, icon libraries and how we do everything, is just using icons. They're a great way to add an easy visual element to either just a bullet point, a subgroup, or even just a slide in general. Just add one icon that's added that's appropriate can give you some of the benefits of those visual elements that we were talking about earlier in this presentation without a whole heck of a lot of additional effort. So in that way, they're a very low-hanging fruit. If you're getting the right kinds of icons, which we'll talk about in a moment, they're very easy to work with within PowerPoint. They're great, as Leanne had mentioned earlier, for continuity throughout a report. So if we're assigning one specific icon to a specific subgroup that we have there, it's a great way to just carry that throughout the report. So for example, if we had a picture, an icon of a person with a tie, we could assign that to agents or brokers, and then somebody without a tie could just be consumers if you have those two subgroups. The different subgroups that we could have there, we could assign one icon to a broker or an agent, and then as that's initially set up in the report, the next time that the reader sees that, they are immediately primed to receive information about an agent or a broker. So that's a great way to keep continuity and keep consistent themes throughout a report. As Leanne had mentioned earlier, once you start doing this more and getting more options for or more into doing this, purchasing an icon library is something you might want to invest in. So it's a great thing to have and a great resource to have if you're going to be doing a lot more visual reporting. We definitely have a few that we have purchased and that we use frequently. So as you're going to do that, if you decide to go down that road, either choosing an individual icon or an icon library, choosing the right kinds of icons would be extremely important. So something that you want to look into as you're purchasing one is whether or not they are vector over raster, and that just means that you're able to resize it without it getting pixelated, and also icons that are formatted for PowerPoint to come in as shapes will allow you the full palette of colors that's within PowerPoint if you're going to go ahead and look for changing colors within there. So again, icons are a great way an easy way to add visual elements to your report without a whole heck of a lot of effort.
Great. So then you're ready to dig in. So just a few things to keep in mind. When you start this process, and if you haven't done it before, there is no doubt that it will take longer than just typing bullets on a slide. So be prepared to invest some extra time in the process. And trial and error is a great way to learn. I can't tell you how many times I had an idea, I tried to do it and realized it wouldn't work, tweaked it, went another route, but the more you do, the easier it will become, and you'll discover shortcuts and workarounds. And sometimes you might just find that you need to step away. You know, if you're coming up dry, put it aside, do something else, and then when you go back to it, it might be inspired. But it's really, you know, a great way of communicating information to the reader in a way that's going to be engaging and interesting for them.
So in a moment, we're about to show you some examples. We have a couple of bullet points of data that we went ahead and added in a couple different ways. We represented visually, so we'll show you that and kind of explain the process that we went through for those. But before we do that, we'll just go and know your data. That's important, obviously, in any research study, but being able to really distill the language and know what's important, what you want to try to communicate, that becomes exponentially more important as you're going to create visuals. Outline a plan, go ahead and write things out on paper, speak to some of your colleagues, both within and without a project. Use tools for inspiration. Go on, do a quick Google search for some inspiration, see how other folks have done it, and use that to kind of inspire how you want to do it. Use tools that you have both with icon libraries and different reporting templates, and also using tools that you steal from yourself, as Leanne had mentioned, keeping resources of things that you've done in the past and that your colleagues have done in the past is definitely a great way to get started. And then just dig in. As Leanne had mentioned, there's no way to get better at anything other than just doing it and keeping trying. So the more and more that you actually do use visual elements, the easier it will get and the better it will become.
So we wanted to present some data, so we thought a fun way of doing that. If any of you have ever attended any industry conferences and seen us there, you may know us as the Cupcake People. When we go to conferences, we hire a local bakery to make cupcakes for our booth, and that's how we draw visitors in, and we are kind of well known at some of these events. So we thought it'd be fun to just pull some cupcake facts. So I don't know if you knew that in the 1700s, cupcakes were originally called 1, 2, 3, 4 cakes because of their ingredients. December 15th is National Cupcake Day. The world's largest cupcake weighed over 1,200 pounds and had over 2 million calories. The most expensive cupcake was sold in Dubai, and it was over $1,000, called the Golden Phoenix. It was made with Italian cocoa, Ugandan vanilla beans, and 23-karat gold. We thought this would be fun to demonstrate, but the record for cupcake eating is 29 cupcakes in 30 seconds. Yikes. And then just some informal data that we collected at our booths. We found that 40% of our visitors prefer chocolate, 35% like key lime best, and we're often down in Florida at conferences, so that could be why. 10% go for lemon, and 15% prefer some other flavor. We also have found that 70% of our booth visitors say that, oh, they can't eat a cupcake. Nope, can't do it. But 92% end up taking a cupcake and eating it. And then we also have 30% of our attendees who take a cupcake telling us that it's for their child, which we know what that really means.
A likely story.
Yeah, so we just wanted to pull together some slides to show you how we could take that data, again, just in a bulleted list, and make it a little more visual. When we were in the process of putting together this presentation, I happened to be on Pinterest, and I thought, just for fun, I actually put into Pinterest cupcake infographic, and I got this idea that I stole from. I didn't take the visuals from there. I found my own visuals, but again, it's the same data in the bullets, but this is just another way of presenting it that is a little more fun, a little more inviting to the reader. Yep, and so if we take a look at this next one, if you remember Andy's craft beer example that he showed us earlier, here's another example. So I basically just found this picture, blew it up to fit on the slide, and then filled in the blank space with our facts that we're trying to show. And this is just another visual way of presenting the same information.
And we went ahead and did something just to kind of illustrate that you don't need to do quite as much as what Leanne had there. You can still kind of make things relatively simple, but still kind of get those benefits from a couple of icons and maybe a template. So what we had here, we kind of created this on the plane on the way to the conference. So this left side with this conference attendee, and we thought it was cute to add in Jane Doe. It was SIR, the conference that we had done this presentation at. So we had this whole background in this template that was already set up, that was added just to add a little bit of flavor to it, no pun intended. And then we kind of had this other set from a different template that we had pulled in different icons that we went and got that were appropriate, but kind of just set up in that way. So again, not too much that's added to the slide, not a ton of effort that went into it, but you can still get some visual elements out of it. Here's another example, kind of a little more infographic-y in the way that it's segmented here. On the top, we have different subgroups being set up with different colors here, so the different colors to represent the different flavors of chocolate, key lime, and lemon. Then to the lower left, again, we have an icon with somebody kind of snagging a couple of cupcakes that are apparently for their children. And then in the lower right, we have the mental struggle that's going on with this conference goer here, kind of giving in to the inevitable cupcake. And so as we go in here, we were mentioning a couple of our different links, and don't feel like you have to write everything down. We're going to send this list, but these are kind of broken out into three different buckets here. Icon and photo resources that we use. Some of them are all set up there, and the final one is a good article on how to use icons and convert them to different file extensions and just a different way to technically use them. A couple of really good PowerPoint reporting templates that we use, the Vivid Infographics Pack and the Presentation Load Infographics Bundle, as well as a really cool screen capture and auto-cropping software that we use that works both within and without of PowerPoint, called Snagit. It's a really cool tool. So again, we'll be sharing this list with you.